Hi folks, I'm Nick Marchese from CloudAsta, and today we're going to be talking about offboarding your users, some things to know. You may know a lot of these things already, but this is us just sharing some tips and tricks and some best practices that you should probably be thinking about when you're offboarding your users. Today we're going to have three large buckets that we're going to be thinking about when offboarding users: revoking security access and securing that account, delegation and retention of data, and deletion, suspension, or archive. We'll talk about what you should be doing. Here's our outline for our first section about revoking security access. So there's a lot of things that you may need to do rather quickly, depending on how the offboarding is going for a particular user. So here are a couple of different things that we recommend. So first things first, resetting or changing the password for that user account. That's pretty easy from the Google Admin Console. So I'm going to toggle back and forth here. So I have a user that we're going to be working with today, Wiley Coyote, who is leaving us. And we can reset his password right here. We can automatically generate one, or we can go ahead and just create a new one right here. So we'll reset that password, and I'll copy this for our records, but that way it's changed from the user. Okay, let's toggle back. Changing the recovery email or phone. So if this user had a secondary recovery email or phone number set up in security here, we want to go ahead and change those. They did not, but you can simply go in and tweak those from that point there. Some other things, and I'll go a little bit out of order here, if there's any security keys that are in here, you can go ahead and edit those or clear those there. And you can reset the sign-in cookies for that user here. Also, if they have any app-specific passwords or anything like that, or connected apps, you can go ahead and clear those in this space as well. So a lot of this is in the security bubble within the users page right here. Okay, some other things that we did not yet talk about. So reviewing the logs for any external Gmail or any external drive shares. So if you're familiar with the investigation tool, you can go into the investigation tool and you can search for that user, and you can search for if anything's been shared outside of your organization. That way you can start to see if this person may or may not have been sharing things with a personal account or with anybody else as they're walking out the door. And lastly, removing from any groups. So again, you could do that from this main page here. This user is in 2 groups. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to select all of those groups and remove. And they will no longer be in those groups. And you're just trying to tidy some things up and make sure things are looking okay. A more advanced feature that we did not put on here, but I wanted to share, was if you are using a MDM for managed devices, you can also go through the admin console to wipe data from users' devices as well. So there's more details on all of these topics on Google's own Help Center. I highly recommend you checking that out, specifically for our revoking security access. Okay, our next section is about delegation and retention. So now that you've secured the account and you've kept the person out of that account, things you have to start thinking about are data and email access and retention. So a couple of different things to think about. If we start with email, there's 2 different ways you can think about email with automatic replies. You can leave the account active, since you've changed all of the security settings that the user should not be able to log in anymore. And you could just set up a vacation responder and out of office message to automatically reply saying, this person is no longer here, please email X and X candidate or manager. So that's one way to do it if you're going to keep the account live. And you can also, from the user's account, go into the settings and the Gmail settings and set up account delegation. So that way you can have the manager or another person have direct email delegation access to that inbox. Again, this is all included in Google's help documentation, specifically about offboarding an employee. A different way to do this, if you are not keeping the account active and you are moving it into a suspended state, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. If you have an email account that's suspended, if somebody were to email that email address, it's just automatically to bounce back. So there's a couple different ways around that. Two ways that come to mind are you can set up, a couple ways that come to mind. You can set up a group with the same name as the user, and then it just forwards to whoever you want it to forward to. You can set up the email address as an alias on whoever you want it to forward to. Or you can set up some mail routing options in there and set up a group for all of your departing people and have a generic one. So that way, if the account was suspended or archived and somebody was still emailing to it, they would get the email bounce back that comes from the group. So there's a couple of different ways to do that. We're happy to help you set that up and walk you through that if you just reach out to us here at CloudAusta. Some other things when it comes to retention is thinking about how you want to maintain all of that data. So there's a couple of different things that you can do for maintaining that data. So you can export it all. Again, so this is depending on whether you have the account active or suspended or archived. You can go into Takeout as the user and just do a simple Google takeout and get a download of all of those files. You can go into Vault and you could do a Vault export for all the files owned by that user. Other things you could do is you can, in the admin console, you can go to your apps under, let's start with Drive and Docs. If you want, you can transfer ownership of all the files from one user to another. So that's one thing, keeping in mind it is going to be a lot of files and it will put it in its own special folder, but it is a lot of files. And you can do the same thing for calendar. If you scroll down here in calendar, down to manage events, you can go ahead and transfer events from one user to another. That way, if there is some special client email calendar events already set up, you don't want to have those slipping through the cracks. This is a helpful feature as well. So a couple different things we're talking about, right? So Takeout, Vault, or doing some stuff within the admin console for retaining that data. All right, we'll go into our last section here. Okay, so our last section is about deletion, suspension, or archiving. So a couple of questions to help guide us through this. When is it time to delete our account? What does suspending do? And what is an archive? So suspending your user is just going to put it in a suspended state where the account, you still have full access to it. You can always go back and recover things from Vault. It's really helpful to have that there, but nobody can log into it when it's in a suspended state. Similarly, in an archived state. So you can go ahead and have it archived where you can still access things with Vault, but both for suspended and archived, it can't be emailed to and accessed directly. So the difference between suspension and archive is that suspension still will take up a Google Workspace license that you're paying for, that you might need to move around to a new person. But an archive license is an additional license that you can purchase that is far cheaper, and you can go ahead and apply that just for this archived user. And that way you can keep this account as long as you need to. And keeping in mind for both this and the retention section we talked about before, please refer to whatever your retention rules and laws and compliance regulations are for how long you need to be retaining data for, how long you shouldn't be retaining data for. So archive licenses are a really important thing to check out. That way, if you have a really tight window for the amount of licenses that you have, you can go ahead and move some stuff around. And when is the time to delete an account? Probably not for a while, unless you absolutely need to get rid of that data. Once you delete an account, the data is no longer in Google Vault, is no longer recoverable. So it's really important that you think long and hard about deleting. I recommend suspending and then archiving. Or just suspending, depending on what your license situation is, and only deleting after a longer period of time where you know that you no longer need that data. Perhaps it's a year, depending. Again, check your legal retention rules. Most companies could do a year or 2 or 3, depending on the role or the sensitivity of the access of data that user account has access to. Okay. Thanks so much for listening about offboarding. There's a lot of details here. We just kind of went over a high-level overview, but we recommend that you check out Google Workspace's Help Center. They've got some really great materials that walk you through all these steps. And if you want a little bit of help from a person, please reach out to us. We're happy to do that.